Hi, and welcome everybody to our new webinar on data agility. We'll wait for 1 minute to allow all the attendees to join us.
Hello everyone and welcome to our second webinar on data agility. I am Matteo Carloni, Sales Manager at Rulex.
And I'm Alice Cartasso, Communication Specialist at Rulex. Nice to meet you.
Today we're going to show you 3 examples of typical data agility problems that can be solved with the Rulex platform thanks to its rapid, self-sufficient and cost-effective approach. These examples are typical problems that companies have to face nowadays that have been taken from a real case scenario involving one of the largest online pharmacies in Italy.
Firstly, we will introduce you to the use case and highlight why Rulex was the optimal choice for this company. Then we will delve into 3 practical scenarios. We're going to focus on importing and merging data, on improving its quality, and on how to customize data to meet specific software constraints. On our YouTube channel, you will also find our previous webinar of the series on data agility, where we explain what data agility is and what are its benefits for your time, money, and energy.
Now let's dig into our case study. The data we are dealing with belongs to an online pharmacy. We decided to buy a widely used software for managing inventory in the pharmaceutical sector. These vertical solutions always present a lot of features that are typical for a specific industry, but also a lot of challenges when it comes to harmonize the data before implementing the solution. Alice, would you like to mention some of the challenges the online pharmacy had to face?
One of the main problems was adapting the format of its datasets to the rigid structure of the new software. To handle the task, the pharmacy decided to turn to external experts.
Yeah, and I imagine that external experts' time and knowledge don't come at a cheap price, right?
Exactly. The pharmacy was quoted 27,000 euros, or about 23,000 pounds, to have tailored Python scripts written for them in order to integrate its existing data to the new system. It then turned out that the same job could be done in a few weeks with a year of Rulex Factory personal license, which costs less than a quarter of the quote price. We're talking about 5,000 euros or 4,000 pounds. Rulex Factory is a component of Rulex Platform that we're going to use today for our examples. Once you have Rulex Factory, you can use it to solve any data problems without extra costs. The pharmacy also owned the solution and could handle it independently thanks to a user-friendly, no-code interface. So they didn't need to ask and pay for external help for every small change. You can imagine then that this was a no-brainer and the pharmacy decided to go for Rulex. So now I'm going to show our listeners a sneak peek of some of the operations we have performed for a pharmacy. Don't get overwhelmed, because today we are going to analyze only some parts of this workflow, and specifically a few tasks containing several operations. Also note that the files you'll see have been simplified to make them easier to understand and to respect the privacy of our clients.
Okay, let's start with the first example. Alice, let's suppose that I want to sell my products abroad and I would like to merge all the transactions written in different languages into a single dataset. Moreover, I also would like to implement a scalable method that can accommodate company growth. Does it require a lot of effort?
Oh, not at all, Matteo. As you can see from this list, the online pharmacy was selling products through Amazon in different countries, and Amazon was returning, for each of them, a file in the country's language. However, the basic structure was the same for each file. Date, product description, order city, fees. Note that every file not only contains different column names, but also a brief description, which might make a regular copy-paste merging process more complicated. This is especially true when dealing with large amounts of information. We don't need this description in our final file. Now, we'll show you how fast and easy it is to import and join datasets with Rulex Factory. Just drag the folder where all the transactions are saved directly onto the canvas. You can also import a zip folder if it contains text files. Check that the folder icon is selected. Select the inner concatenation type to make sure that only those entries that are present in both files are included in the merged file. Select Match Columns by Position, since the structure of the file is the same, but the attributes are written in different languages. Go to Text Configuration and insert 8 in Start Importing from Line, since the rows above contain only a description and not the values we are interested in. Also select Find Names in row 8, since it's where we can find the column names. Select the inverted commas as a text delimiter, as that's how values have been divided up in the specific transaction files. Save and compute the task to make your changes persistent. Right-click on the task to take a look at your unified dataset. Pretty easy, right?
Wow, the importing and the merging of an entire folder have been executed with one single task in a few clicks. This is really time saver.
It is, yes. Also imagine that any new files that will be saved into that folder will automatically be imported into Rulex Platform, saving us from the tedious task of individually importing them. And any changes in the file names will not affect the import. Talking about importing data, I would like to point out something for our Python users. The first is that when we merge datasets, we could also add a new attribute to each row containing the name of the dataset it comes from by selecting Add an attribute containing file name in the import options. This in Python would require about 100 lines of code. The second thing is when there are errors in any of the files contained in the folder. With Python, it will be difficult to detect them straight away. But what happens with Rulex Platform? Let's try it. This folder is exactly the same, but one file contains an error. Now I'll import it by following all the steps we had done before. Inner concatenation, match by position, text delimiter, start importing from line 8 and get names from line 8. When I save a compute, a pop-up error comes up. It says the line 3883 is very long. It's the software's way to tell us that that specific row contains a significantly higher number of attributes than others. So there must be an error. We can open the dataset in Excel or in the text editor, check what the problem is in that specific row, and correct it. In our case, the culprit is a text delimiter.
Thank you, Alice. I would also like to point out that the Rulex platform has dedicated tasks like the R bridge and the Python bridge to import external scripts into a Rulex workflow. This means that if you have external scripts, you don't lose them. These features are one of the reasons why Rulex platform is also called a developer platform, because actually it helps developers to produce and build solutions in a fast way without losing the flexibility of coding. But now let's talk about the second example. And let's go back to talk about our online pharmacy that wanted to merge the different datasets based on the column they had in common, and also adapt the ID code of their products in order to be compliant with the new vertical solutions they bought for the inventory management. So did these operations require a lot of effort, Alice?
Of course not. Let's see how this can easily be done. Firstly, we'll drag the two datasets onto the canvas. Select and click on Compute Selected to compute them. They both contain information about the products, and they come from different sources. One file has a mini-sum column, plus other attributes, like last cost wholesaler or last cost wholesaler date. The other file has a mini-sum attribute, plus last price BD. To join them, drag a join task onto the canvas. Connect it to the files we have just imported and double-click on it. We need a common key attribute, which is unique for each and present in both datasets. In this case, we can use minisum, which is basically the product code. Now select inner join again, and then unselect one of the two minisum attributes to avoid having two identical columns in the final dataset. Save and compute. Right-click on the join task and select Take a Look. As you can see, the two files have been merged. Here we have all the attributes contained in one file, such as last price pharmacy. And here there is the last price BD of the other file, and the common attribute minisum.
So the minisum is the identification code assigned to each product. At the moment, the code sometimes contains 6 digits, other times 7, 8 or 9. The pharmacy's new inventory software requires this code to be a nominal attribute, always made up of 9 digits. Is changing all these values complicated?
Once again, all the operations we need can be computed in one single task, the data manager. This task really is Rulex secret data preparation weapon, where you can explore, sort, query, filter your data, and derive new attributes from your data. And it's all very intuitive, as I'll be showing you now. I'll drag the data manager onto the canvas, connect it to our join task, and double-click on it. Here's our join file with the minisum column. Let's change the attribute name by right-clicking on it, select Rename, write product code, rename. Then, to make this code a 9-digit one, select the attribute we want to apply the function to on the left side of the formula bar, in this case product code, by clicking on it. Then go to the right side of the formula bar and write a pad function. Write pad, open the brackets, select product code, comma, 9, comma, 0 in between inverted commas, begin in between inverted commas, close the brackets. Apply by clicking on the tick. Basically, we are telling Rulex Platform to add as many zeros as necessary to reach a 9-digit code, and that we want to add them to the beginning of the value. Now you'll see that all the values for the column product code are 9 digits long and are expressed as a nominal attribute. A quick fix, isn't it?
Thank you, Alice. Now, for our third example, we will show you how efficiently and effortlessly we could solve some data quality issues thanks to our data manager. You will realize that being able to see results, attributes, and values straight away could speed up a lot the data cleansing process. We'll import a very simplified dataset which used to contain sensitive information about our pharmacy's clients. Let's connect a data manager to our file to take a closer look. The attributes found in the columns are client, street, street number, zip code, city, province, country, email, verified email, tax exemption. As you can see, many of the values are missing. What's more, there are inconsistencies in how missing values are expressed. In the zip code column, for example, some are 0, while others are indicated by an empty cell. The inventory software requires these missing values to be expressed as a noun value or to simply be empty cells. Alice, how can we do that?
We are going to right-click on the attribute and select Edit. We can see a list of the values that the attribute has in our file. We'll click on the bin next to the value 0 to make it a noun value. You can see that the cells that were containing a value 0 are now empty.
As a second step, we would like to change the values in the column tax exemption to 0 when tax exemption is N and to 1 if tax exemption is Y. This is, again, to comply with the restrictions of the vertical inventory software.
In order to do that, we just have to select the target column, in this case text exemption, and instruct Rulex Platform to perform the operation we have just described. In this case, we are going to write an if-else formula. If-else, open the brackets, click on tax exemption, equal, n, comma 0, comma 1. This means if the value of the tax exemption is n, then write the value 0. Otherwise, write the value 1. Here we can see that the value for the column tax exemption have been changed.
The inventory software also requires the attributes street and street number to be in the single column called address.
Again, we'll use the formula bar. We're going to select the column name, then write street by clicking on the column street, plus space in between brackets, plus street number by clicking on the street number column, to tell the Rulex Platform to merge them. Click on the tick. Now the attributes that were divided into two columns are now in one. We can now delete the column street number and rename street with address by right-clicking on the attribute, rename, and write address.
So far, we have addressed missing values and inconsistencies, but poor decisions can also be caused by duplicates in your data. Here, we notice that there are two columns that contain information about email addresses. One is email, and the other one is verified email. What if we wanted to keep only one email column containing the verified email values whenever these are available?
To do so, we'll filter verified email to see only the values that are not none by dragging it to the pre-filter area. We will then tell the software to substitute the values of email to those of verified email by selecting the attribute email in the left part of the formula bar and verified email in the right part of the formula bar. Basically, we are telling the software to apply this formula: email equal verified email. Since we had applied the filter not none to verified email, the value of email will be overwritten by that of verified email only when the last one is available. Click on the tick to apply the formula. As you can see, all the values have been substituted. Clear the filter and see that the value of email was not changed whenever verified email was not available. And now, let's delete the attribute verified email. Save and compute to make the changes persistent. After all these operations, the dataset is ready to be fed into the new inventory software. These are simple examples, but performing several functions in a single data manager task with a what you see is what you get interface is obviously handy when dealing with large quantities of information. If you also save all these operations and click on the History tab, you'll find a list of every step you performed in this data manager. And if you click on any single action, you'll also see the corresponding code, which can also be versioned.
And this was our last practical example of the day. I would also like to remind you that you can download a 30-day trial of our Rulex platform directly from our website. And if you want to know more about data agility, please check our last webinar, What on Earth is Data Agility and Why Should Give a Damn, directly on our YouTube channel or on our community.
We'd also like to mention that we're going to be at the Big Data London in September. So, if you'd like to have a chat and a coffee with us, please come and visit us at booth A43. You can secure your spot now on our website by booking a free consultation. And we hope you enjoyed this webinar and that we will see you again soon. Bye!
Bye!